Elias, a young violinist with a melancholic air about him, arrived in the quiet town of Oakhaven with a single suitcase and a heart full of unanswered questions. He had fled the bustling city life after a particularly painful breakup, seeking a solace and inspiration in the rumored tranquility of the countryside. His violin case, his constant companion, felt heavier than usual, burdened not just by the instrument within, but also by the weight of his creative block. Music, once his refuge, now seemed to elude him, the melodies trapped somewhere within his troubled soul. Oakhaven was a town steeped in history, its cobblestone streets and time-worn buildings whispering tales of bygone eras. Elias, drawn to the aura of forgotten grandeur, found himself wandering towards the imposing structure of the Municipal Theatre. Its faded facade, adorned with chipped statues and peeling paint, hinted at a glorious past, now shrouded in neglect. The theatre seemed to emanate a melancholic charm, a silent invitation to explore its hidden depths. He pushed open the heavy oak doors, their hinges groaning in protest, and stepped into a dimly lit foyer. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, filtering through the grimy windows, illuminating the faded velvet curtains and the worn carpets. A sense of hushed expectancy hung in the air, as if the theatre held its breath, waiting for the curtain to rise once more. Elias wandered through the silent corridors, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. He peeked into dressing rooms with cracked mirrors and faded posters, imagining the echoes of laughter and hurried preparations that once filled these spaces. The theatre, despite its decay, exuded an undeniable allure, a sense of stories yearning to be told. As he reached the main hall, a faint sound caught his attention. It was a violin melody, hauntingly beautiful and filled with a profound sadness. He followed the sound, his heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, until he reached the stage. There, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moonbeams that streamed through a broken skylight, stood a translucent figure, its form shimmering like heat haze. The figure held a violin, its bow moving with an almost agonizing grace, drawing forth the mournful melody that had led Elias there. He stood, frozen, his breath caught in his throat as the ghostly figure continued to play. The music seemed to seep into his very being, resonating with the unspoken grief he carried within. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving Elias alone in the echoing silence, the lingering notes of the violin hanging. Heavy in the air, he stood there for a long moment, his mind reeling, trying to grasp what he had just witnessed. Was it a hallucination, a figment of his troubled imagination? Or had he just encountered something truly extraordinary, something that defied all logic and reason? A shiver ran down his spine, a primal fear mixed with an undeniable fascination. He had to know more. He had to understand. The next morning, Elias awoke with a start, the ghostly melody still echoing in his mind. He couldn't shake off the feeling that what he had witnessed was real, that the theatre held a secret waiting to be uncovered. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, he decided to delve into the history of the building, hoping to find some explanation for the spectral violinist. He spent the day poring over old newspapers and local archives, piecing together the theatre's history. He learned that the Municipal Theatre had been built in the late 19th century, a symbol of Oakhaven's prosperity and cultural aspirations. It had hosted renowned actors, singers, and musicians, its stage a platform for dreams and ambitions. But amidst the tales of triumphs and standing ovations, a darker story emerged, a tragedy that had cast a long shadow over the theatre's history. Elias discovered the story of Arthur Blackwood, a gifted violinist who had lived in Oakhaven during the theatre's golden age. Arthur, a solitary figure consumed by his passion for music, had poured his heart and soul into his violin, his melancholic melodies captivating audiences. He had dreamt of escaping the confines of Oakhaven, of sharing his music with the world. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. On a fateful night in 1889, during a performance that was supposed to be his breakthrough, tragedy struck. A fire erupted in the theatre, engulfing the stage in flames. Arthur, trapped amidst the inferno, perished along with his beloved violin. The cause of the fire remained a mystery, with whispers of foul play circulating through the town. Some claimed that Arthur had been murdered by a jealous rival, his dreams extinguished in a blaze of envy and malice. The legend of Arthur Blackwood, the melancholic violinist, took root in Oakhaven's folklore. It was said that his spirit, unable to find peace, remained trapped within the theatre, his mournful melodies echoing through the empty halls. Some claimed to have seen his ghostly figure on the stage, forever playing his violin, forever seeking an audience that could no longer hear him. Elias, deeply moved by Arthur's story, felt a strange connection to the deceased musician. He too had known the pain of unfulfilled dreams, the frustration of a creative spirit yearning for expression. He felt an overwhelming urge to understand Arthur, to unravel the mystery of his tragic fate. His search led him to a dusty antique shop where he stumbled upon a hidden treasure, a leather-bound diary, its pages filled with faded ink and the faint scent of lavender. The diary belonged to Arthur Blackwood, a window into his soul, his hopes, and his despair. As Elias read through the entries, he felt a growing sense of kinship with the young musician, their lives separated by time, but united by a shared passion and a profound sense of melancholy. As the days turned into weeks, Elias found himself drawn to the theatre with increasing frequency. He would spend hours wandering through its desolate corridors, his violin case by his side, listening for the haunting melody that had first captured his attention. The ghostly music seemed to grow stronger, more insistent, as if Arthur's spirit was reaching out, seeking a connection. Elias's encounters with the spectral violinist became more frequent. He would catch glimpses of the translucent figure on the stage, its form more defined now, the sadness in its eyes palpable. The mournful melody that filled the theatre seemed to seep into Elias's soul, stirring emotions he had long suppressed. He felt a profound empathy for Arthur, a shared understanding of the artist's struggle, the yearning for recognition, the fear of being forgotten. The theatre, once a place of forgotten grandeur, now thrummed with an unsettling energy. Objects moved inexplicably, lights flickered erratically, and a cold draft seemed to follow Elias wherever he went. He felt a constant presence, a watchful gaze that sent shivers down his spine. The line between reality and the supernatural blurred, and Elias began to question his own sanity. He tried to confide in the locals, sharing his experiences, but was met with skepticism and pity. They dismissed his stories as the ramblings of a troubled mind, a city boy ill-equipped to handle the solitude of the countryside. Elias felt isolated, his connection to the spectral world a secret burden he carried alone. Driven by an insatiable need to understand, Elias began to transcribe the ghostly melody that haunted the theatre. He would sit on the stage, his own, violin in hand, attempting to replicate the mournful notes, to decipher the message hidden within the music. As his fingers danced across the strings, he felt a strange connection to Arthur, as if their souls were communicating through the language of music. One evening, as Elias played, he was overcome by a wave of dizziness. The theatre around him seemed to dissolve, replaced by a vision of the past. He saw Arthur, young and vibrant, practicing tirelessly on the stage, his face alight with passion. He saw Arthur arguing with a shadowy figure, their voices muffled by the distance. And then he saw the fire, the flames engulfing the stage, Arthur's screams echoing through the smoke-filled air. The vision vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Elias trembling and breathless. He had witnessed Arthur's final moments, felt his fear and despair. The experience solidified his connection to the ghostly violinist, fueling his determination to help Arthur find peace. Elias, now more determined than ever to unravel the mystery surrounding Arthur's death, intensified his research. He delved deeper into the archives, searching for any clues that might shed light on the events of that fateful night. He discovered that Arthur, on the cusp of his breakthrough, had been scheduled to embark on a European tour, a chance to finally share his music with the world. He also learned that Arthur's violin, a meticulously crafted instrument with a rich, resonant tone, was not just a tool of his trade, but a prized possession, a symbol of his dedication and artistry. As Elias pieced together the fragments of information, a disturbing pattern emerged. He found accounts of a rival violinist, a man named Frederick Hawthorne, who had been consumed by envy for Arthur's talent. Hawthorne, a mediocre musician with a thirst for fame, had openly expressed his resentment towards Arthur, his words laced with bitterness and malice. Elias stumbled upon a forgotten article in a local newspaper, a brief mention of a heated argument between Arthur and Hawthorne just days before the fire. The article, buried deep within the archives, hinted at a possible motive for murder. Could Hawthorne, driven by jealousy and ambition, have set the fire to eliminate his rival and steal his opportunity for fame? The more Elias investigated, the more convinced he became that Arthur's death was no accident. He felt a surge of anger towards Hawthorne, a burning desire to expose the truth and bring justice to the deceased musician. He returned to the theatre, his heart heavy with the weight of his discovery. As he stood on the stage, the ghostly melody seemed to swirl around him, filled with a newfound urgency. He saw Arthur's apparition more clearly than ever before, the sadness in his eyes now tinged with anger and frustration. Elias, summoning his courage, spoke to the spectral figure, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. "Arthur," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I know what happened to you. You were murdered. Frederick Hawthorne, your rival, he set the fire. He took your life and your dreams." The apparition's form flickered, its violin falling silent. A wave of icy air swept through the theatre, and the lights flickered violently. Arthur's ghostly face contorted in a mask of rage, his eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. The theatre seemed to groan under the weight of his fury, the very walls vibrating with his anguish. Elias, though terrified, stood his ground, his gaze locked with the spectral figures. He had finally given voice to the truth that had been silenced for over a century, unleashing the pent-up emotions of a tormented soul. The theatre raged around Elias, a maelstrom of spectral energy unleashed by Arthur's fury. Dust rained down. From the ceiling, the old chandeliers swayed precariously, and the ghostly melody that had once been mournful now shrieked with rage and despair. Elias, though fear gripped his heart, felt a surge of empathy for the tormented spirit. He understood Arthur's pain, the injustice of his fate, the frustration of a life cut short, a dream denied. "Arthur," Elias called out, his voice firm despite the chaos surrounding him, "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but this anger is keeping you trapped. It's consuming you. You need to let go. You need to find peace." He stepped closer to the spectral figure, his hand outstretched in a gesture of empathy. "Let me help you," he pleaded. "Let me tell your story. Let the world know the truth about what happened to you. Let your music be heard." The fury in Arthur's eyes seemed to waver, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. The chaotic energy in the theatre subsided slightly, the ghostly melody softening, the notes tinged with a hint of longing. Elias pressed on, his voice filled with sincerity. "Your music is beautiful, Arthur," he said. "It deserves to be heard. It deserves to live. Let me help you find peace, so your music can finally soar." Arthur's spectral form hovered, his gaze fixed on Elias. The young violinist could sense the internal struggle within the tormented spirit, the battle between anger and the yearning for release. Then, slowly, Arthur's ghostly hand reached out, his translucent fingers brushing against Elias's. A wave of icy coldness washed over Elias, but he held his ground, his gaze unwavering. In that moment of connection, Elias felt a surge of understanding. He knew what he had to do. He would organize a concert, a tribute to Arthur Blackwood, a chance for his music to finally reach the audience it deserved. He would play Arthur's unfinished symphony, the one he had found in the diary, the one that held the essence of his soul. With renewed purpose, Elias set about organizing the concert. He reached out to local musicians, sharing Arthur's story, his passion igniting theirs. He cleaned and repaired the neglected theatre, restoring it to a semblance of its former glory. And on the night of the concert, the Municipal Theatre, once a symbol of tragedy and neglect, was filled with light and music. As Elias stood on the stage, his violin in hand, he felt Arthur's presence beside him. He began to play the notes of the unfinished symphony filling the air, a testament to Arthur's talent and his unfulfilled dreams. And as the music soared, Arthur's spectral form appeared on the stage, bathed in the warm glow of the stage lights. He stood beside Elias, his ghostly violin joining in the melody, the two musicians united in a symphony of redemption. The audience was captivated, their hearts touched by the beauty of the music, the story of the melancholic violinist brought to life. And as the final notes faded, Arthur's apparition smiled, a look of peace and gratitude on his face. Then, with a gentle sigh, he vanished, his spirit finally free. Elias felt a pang of sadness at Arthur's departure, but also a sense of fulfillment. He had helped a tormented soul find peace, had given voice to a silenced talent. The theatre, once haunted by tragedy, was now filled with the echoes of hope and redemption. And as Elias continued his musical journey, he carried with him the legacy of Arthur Blackwood, the melancholic violinist whose music had finally found its way into the world.